there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 11 of the anime series Hitsugi no Chaika. And this episode was absolutely just exciting beyond reproach. I was on the edge of my seat all through this episode, and it really ramped up the tension and, the goings-on every step of the way through the course of this episode, building to one hell of an epic penultimate cliffhanger. Of course, we're picking up right where we left off, with a heated battle unfolding between Toru and the brainwashed Akari, brainwashed, as we saw in the previous episode, by magic, this wizard who is working in tandem with Riccardo Gavarni, the son of the former, and I say former because his own son killed him, overseer of one of the areas of the Six Nations. Essentially they have outlined a bringing back of a warlike state. A war economy is what they want to be at the center of because of all of those things that they can pervert and twist and the money they can make and everything like that. They want to bring about war once again, and they're doing this with the help of this cloaked mystery girl, Layla, who, much as I surmised in my previous episode discussion, would turn out to be another Chaika. Lo and behold, that's exactly what she reveals herself to be after insinuating Chaika away from Toru, and basically she has laid down the groundwork and a little more of the history of how these Chaikas were created, spun off from a source Chaika, and their sole purpose through many different incarnations was to gather the remains of Arthur Gaz. And each of these Chaikas, much as, again, I have surmised, all depict themselves with different kind of characterizations in that, the main Chaika we follow is very innocent, very childlike. This is something this false Chaika, Layla, points out, as well as there are those who are calculating, more like the red Chaika, perhaps. And then there are those who have disdained the entire purpose of their being, like this particular Chaika herself, Layla. And she is, creating this war state of being, or trying to rebel against the forces that put them all to work to find Arthur Gaz's relics to begin with. And so, the crux of the story right there takes a gigantic, hell of a pivot turning point. But then, of course, you have the unfolding potential war. The Six Nations are coming to create war with this particular flying fortress, Sowara, and you have Gillette's faction trying to stave them off, even to the point of Gillette pulling his sword on the guy who's leading the factions and saying, look, you want war this much? You're sick in the head. I'm going to stand in the way of letting this happen. He is the one true devout soldier of the cause of peace in amongst all of these factions of government and everything like that. He is a truly noble character, Gillette. But also because he's got, Vivi and Zeta, two of the girls under his command, are stuck in this place, and we see that because they need to get out of there, they're aware of the oncoming attacks and everything, they have basically, and more by Zeta's hand, decided to work with Toru. Once Toru has gone away from Akari for a little while, they've run into each other, and they're like, why are you guys fighting? What the hell's going on? How are you even in here in the first place? And all these questions are flying back and forth. Vivi's a lot less susceptible to trusting him and considering him an ally, but she ends up having that kind of changed by the end, once they parted ways, because Toru basically took an arrow in the arm, trying to get her out of the way of it. And so she finally realizes, okay, he's honest, he's trying to help us, he's very unlike a saboteur, the way one should be. And essentially you have Vivi and Zeta basically promising him they are going to fight Akari and keep her occupied while he goes on the outside of this airship and using his, sort of grapplers and everything, he's going to find a better way into the command center, or at least to find Chaika. And of course, we have Frederica finally showing up amidst the confrontation between Chaika and this false Chaika, Layla, where she's like, you going to give us the relics or not? She's basically trying to imply her level of power, being a dragoon and everything, don't make me break your ass, But all of a sudden, this giant, magically created spider comes up from behind her and shucks her right in the skull. And, this is when Layla basically reiterates the fact that the one weakness of a dragoon is the brain. So there's a large fear in that moment that Frederica has actually just been killed, for real this time. The hope is, at least for me, that that is not the case, that, this isn't the last we've seen of Frederica. In any case, as I say, it was stacked with the chips against our heroes once again in just the absolute crazy amount of stuff going on against them. There's an impending war. They're all split up. One of them is brainwashed. You have two of them reluctantly siding with their former enemies and all this kind of stuff, as well as the incredulous and just plainly horrific revelation of what has happened to all of the women who were taken in tow by the Sawara. They have all been slaughtered and cut apart and are hanging within the walls of the machinations of this flying fortress, fueling it. And Gillette is standing there on the ground, facing off against an entire army of ground forces saying, I'm not going to let you go to war. So it couldn't be any more incredible at this point, with everything stacked against our heroes, and I am dying to see what the next steps result with. So yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.